topic that a lot of people say they want to get involved in and more are interested in. But actually, how do you sit down and have those conversations with clients? How do you engage them and understand what their needs and motivations are in a day-to-day basis? So literally sitting across from tables, multi-generational families thinking about it, or new people coming in. But also we have a behavioral finance specialist on my team thinking about it from that perspective also. The second thing that we're doing is actually working with the investment teams. So one of the things that I said, different from other banks, is that I didn't want us to be running any money separate from the investment teams that we have. So we have discretionary portfolio managers who are picking stocks and bonds to build portfolios. We have fund manager selection teams that are picking out different fund managers in the liquid space. We've got private assets team looking at fund managers in the private equity or private debt space, and our direct investments platform. So actually looking across that spectrum of different asset classes and thinking about how do we bring impact, sustainable ESG into the investment process to make better investment decisions. And the last one is sort of the external facing, sort of some of the work that we do in terms of helping to build the market, share our points of view, and get involved in initiatives that range from the impact management project that started up a couple of years ago to ourselves. We've launched something that I'll come back to called Impact Agora, thinking about how do we build out the market in the early stage, in the social entrepreneur space in particular. In many respects, this is an evolution of how we think about investing. And I mean that in a real genuine sense, sort of an interesting stage of where we are from an investment industry and even a financial services industry post-financial crisis to be about, well, how do we start investing differently and the implications of that? And I mean that in the genuine sense. I'm a firm believer. We talked about investing on a return basis. And in 1952, Markowitz wrote a paper called Modern Portfolio Theory, or brought about Modern Portfolio Theory, to bring risk and return into the conversation. The first one, I'm sure most of you will be familiar with, sort of the idea of ethical investing. But we're really specific around ethical investing in terms of the motivation is very personal there. I have a particular set of moral views, beliefs about how I want the world to be, and therefore where I want my money to be going. And therefore, on that basis, ethical investing for us is a very personal thing. And also, moreover, that the intention in terms of the actions that you're taking with a portfolio is very clearly to exclude certain sectors or companies. Now, it's very simple, actually becomes very complicated very quickly. My morals may not be your morals. You know, for some investors or friends in the US, very clearly Second Amendment gun rights might actually be very important to them in terms of weapons. But on the other hand, very clearly a lot of people don't feel that way. A more recent movement is the responsible investment movement. So from that perspective, we go back to the UN-supported Principles for Responsible Investment, comes out, or they start to emerge in 2005. The idea of taking a long-term or a long-time horizon perspective and thinking about not just financial information, but non-financial information in order to make financial decisions. And the motivation there actually is really financial. So, you know, when you're starting to think about what non-financial information, this is where the environmental, social, and governance insight and data that we now are getting access to, which is not complete, but actually useful for an investor to make a better or more informed decision about what they're doing. And that movement, that next approach, coming to life over the last decade or so, and being able to be part of any investment that we're making, any investment choice that we're making, we're saying, well, actually, we really need to have the best set of information, or we expect our investment managers to be using that in order to make a more informed decision. But that very clearly focuses on an internal aspect of how companies operate, as opposed to goods and services that they provide. And it also brings up some very interesting nuances to it. You know, for many people, they might be surprised that BAT is in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, because on an environmental, social, and governance basis, they do a very good job at farming tobacco. They treat their workers and the workforce very well, and they're well governed, and they pay a lot of corporate taxes. You know, that for a lot of people, and very clearly on an ethical basis, doesn't make a lot of sense. But actually, ESG applies to any company that we're looking at. So now the starting point there is in relation to the integration of these considerations, but it can go beyond that in many respects. But really that focus is financial in many respects. When we get back to the last movement, the impact investing movement, to the point of the conversation, now we start to see where the blending of both these personal motivations and these financial motivations start to come together, where it becomes more as much about where there are societal problems to solve, where clients' money or where investors are seeing there are big opportunities, also with some of the big challenges that we have, and being able to help them to identify those companies that are solving those problems as well as generating the financial return that an investor is fundamentally seeking. And so that last stage of investing is, I think, where we are at now. The impact investing movement clearly came out of the Rockefeller conversation that happened in 2010 to say, well, there are ways that we can solve societal problems. And the first people involved in that were clearly the philanthropists, the people who said, we're giving this money away, but if there are commercial enterprises or commercial operations that can happen to address some of the problems that we want to solve, then let's think about how do we use finance to be able to do that. And so that aspect of being able to blend these things together, the origin story and the origin of this part of the industry has been one that is focused on causes. But more and more what we see are people who are interested on the investment story as well.